All right, so it looks like we are live on Facebook and YouTube and broadcasting throughout the universe. Hi,
Yeah.
welcome to, I'm going to count this as the first official digital LoveMake Craft Workshop in conjunction with the Spelman Museum College of Fine Art. And we are exploring and crafting and experiencing
Spelman Museum College of Fine Art.
Oop, I have
And we are exploring and crafting and
everyone but myself really quickly. We are exploring and experiencing and crafting along with inside Black Image Corporation, which is Theaster Gates' work that is currently on view at the Spelman Museum College of Fine Art. And I thank you for inviting me to share and engage this work in this way. And my name is Danny Brockington, and I am going to have Makiba Dixon Hill, who is the education curator at the Spelman Museum, speak for just a moment on the exhibition and kind of pulling things together for us and explaining why we are here, or a little bit of why we're here tonight.
Thank you, Danielle. I first want to just thank you all for being here with us virtually. Everything that we decide to do with our time and with our energy is always greatly appreciated. And in this particular season, it is immensely appreciated. So representing the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art, we are an institution that has been one of the first to center Black women's artwork all over the world. And so with that type of mission, that type of focus, we are always looking at ways to, in many instances, level up and up the ante on how we're able to practice our work. And one of those things with this particular exhibition that we had on view where our public was able to engage, gosh, seems like forever, but it was last spring. It was an opportunity where Theaster Gates was mining the Johnson Publishing Archive, and it was an opportunity for the general public to actually engage the artwork by looking at these facsimile images and manipulating them by picking them up, moving them around, and actually deciding where they are going to be viewed inside of the museum space in designated areas. And in this exercise of trust and choosing, those two words were intertwined together. And it feels like with the art, it always informs the way we practice. And from a programming perspective, one of the things that we were really rooted in was actually trusting not only our audience, but our community to lead and guide us. And that is exactly what has been happening with working with Danielle Brockington with her digital residency here at the museum. It was a beautiful and very expansive exercise on trusting Black women, trusting creative output, and it's really left us better. And so in this moment, as we're really focused on making conversation and making art together, we're just happy to be able to host. And one of those things that I just have to say from Danielle's introduction, I don't want to say this is the first official, because there have been so many amazing LoveMake crafts that have been happening. And when we look at this beautiful creative's work, she's been engaging the archives of Black publications since what, 2016? So there are so many different expressions of when not only the student is ready, the teacher appears, but when the museum is ready, when the institution is ready, the cultural workers that have been doing this work show up. So we're happy to be able to be practicing with you. I want to say a couple of things about Danielle really quickly, again, more. And also I have to say this one thing as well. Today is Buy from a Black Woman Day. Oh, let's clap it
Yes.
up. It's Buy from a Black Woman Day. And so I challenge you, just go through your address book in your phone, or just get on social media and just pick a letter, and then find the first Black woman that's in the queue that has a business, and sew into that sister's business. And so thinking about the kind of work that Danielle does, she operates under so many different practices and so many different handles. So find her on Instagram, and we'll put her contact information out there, because you can see her from the lens of archivist, you can see her from the lens of content creator, and you can also see her through the lens of someone who is actually building a mission on how we can look at digital programming and digital engagement and move our culture forward. So thank you for this space. And I'm going to turn it right back over to you, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And shout out to Buy from a Black Woman Day. Shout out to Nikki Porche, who is the founder of Buy from a Black Woman. I think she's in some way sponsored every LoveMake I've had from the very first one. So thank you to her. She is actually in a talk right now with, I don't think it's the National Urban League, but it's something fancy. So shout out to her. Just a little introduction about myself and about what these LoveMake Craft Workshops are. This started, now it's 2 years. It would have been February of 2018. I had a whole bunch of extra craft supplies that my mom was like, get them out of my house. You don't live here anymore. So I spend a lot of my free time at Four Keeps Books, where Rosa Duffy is the proprietor. I live down the street on Auburn Avenue. And the first time I walked in there, it felt like home. And literally, it looked like home because she had all of these vintage magazines and books laid out on a table for everyone to peruse and read. And I'm like, oh, this looks like my living room. I have been a collector of Black ephemera and Black culture for as long as I can remember, before I even understood what that collecting was. And after a conversation with a patron in the store one afternoon, a patron was saying how she can never find Black Christmas cards, Black angels and Santa Clauses and those kinds of things. And I started thinking about the collection of images that I just hoard at the time, just hoarded and wasn't really doing anything with. And I thought back to a couple of years ago, several years ago, I learned that the history of, we all know like the history of blackface imagery and those kinds of images being in popular culture, being in comic books, being very pervasive in advertisements in the first part of the 20th century and before, and even continuing into now. But I did not realize that those images were very pervasive in children's Valentine's Day cards. And I don't know what it was about that discovery broke something inside me. I became obsessed with it. I became obsessed with finding them because it was just, this is the most innocent thing that can exist. A little Valentine's Day card that you give your kids to give to their classmates in school, but it has these awful, awful images involved in them. And something about that bothered me. And I mean, of course, that would be bothersome. And then shortly after I made that discovery, I found a Valentine in an old yearbook of my mom's that someone had given her in second grade. And it was had to have been like 1969 if it was her second grade. And it was the most adorable little Black girl with a curly little afro and a duck in her hair. And it was and she was holding a big heart that said, "You're the greatest." And I just remember crying when I saw that Valentine, because I was like, someone in the little town of Florence, South Carolina, where my mom lived and where I was born, found that Valentine. Someone in her class found that and gave it to their child to give to her. And how hard could it have been? It was probably difficult to find those little Valentines that had an adorable little Black girl on them. And it made me think about the years growing up of my mom lying on the floor and coloring in a Barbie sleeping bag to make her brown before I went on a field trip. Those were the things that she would do. So those ideas kind of coalesced in my mind, and I took all those art supplies. I asked my mom to pack them on the train with her and come from Charlotte to Atlanta. And Rosa stayed open one evening, and we had the first LoveMake, and we were making Valentine's Day cards. And I printed out all of these images of Black people in love and being loving, and took all of my old art supplies and laid them out on tables and just invited people to come and make things. And it was the most beautiful experience. I had not intended to ever do it again. I was actually giving up supplies away by the bucket to people, like, take the scissors, take everything. But as I was packing up and cleaning up, I realized, like, me, my mom, Rosa, and I, we all kind of realized I have to keep doing this. And so I kept doing it. And so since then, it's grown into a semi-monthly pop-up that I do, usually at Rosa's. I've done it at Kiyomi's shop at the Good Hair Shop in Westview. And when everything happened in March and we started quarantining, I just could not figure out how to continue and how to turn this very intimate physical experience into something digital, because it's the antithesis of digital. It's very much tactile, very much hands on paper and cutting scissors, because we don't really, as adults, have that. We don't allow ourselves that kind of free time and leisure time to just create for the sake of creating. But when Makiba reached out and asked if I could come up with something for this that is truly the dream project of dream projects, because the Johnson Publishing Archive is my lifelong my lifelong interest. The idea popped into my head to figure out how to turn that experience into a digital experience. So here we are. So I'm going to ask everyone who's here with us to introduce yourselves briefly. And while everyone's doing that, make sure, if you haven't gotten your art pack that's showing at the bottom of the screen and signed up for Canva and gotten everything together, you can go ahead and do that while we are introducing ourselves. So I'm going to start with Stacey.
Hey, I'm Stacey. I write plays. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina.
You're not going to go any further?
No,
okay.
I'm not.
We'll just keep that. Okay.
Can we know the name of the plays, Stacey? I like plays. I would like to know which ones you've written. I'm going back on me.
She's an award-winning playwright who writes for Spike Lee and NBC and all these other people, but we can stop there.
All right. Okay. One thing. I write plays that have won awards. And I write for 911 on Fox, which allows me to write for Angela Bassett. We love to see it.
All right, go ahead, Ebony.
My name is Ebony Blanding. I am a writer-director, native of Atlanta, and I write primarily about Black women and Black folks.
Shalee.
Hi, I had to remember to get off of mute. I was about to start talking. I'm Shalee. I'm working with the museum. I'm in the role of a project manager now. I'm really excited to be working with Spelman and doing like docent projects and things along those lines. I love the arts. I'm a fan of all crafting kind of things. I believe myself to be an artist, but I think it's more in the supportive role, and I'm excited about that and happy to be here.
Well, since I love Shalee, I'll just jump back in. Makiba, I talked for about 15 minutes in the beginning, so I think y'all know me. I'm happy to be here as well.
Awesome. Are we going in order, or we just going? I forgot what the instruction. The worst student ever. I'm Andrea. I also go by Angie, and I'm on Instagram as Art Loving Aries. Stacey left off that one of her plays will be streaming reading this weekend, America 2.1, and I'm here for the plug. So please Google her and watch the play. So those people who said they love theater, there is some happening from her brain on this weekend. And I just want to include that. I am a museum thing, do all kinds of random things in museum world, manage, curate, teach, do all kinds of things. I'm actually really sad that I was never able to book Danny when she was in Atlanta, and I was doing work that would have included this in Charlotte. And we didn't even think of these kinds of platforms at that time. Like, we didn't really think of Zooming people in. I feel like I did it once in my entire time. So I'm just happy that we can get together and do stuff like this in this space. So thank you, Danny, for adapting it. And then I'm also a theater person. So I perform, write, and do theater things as well. So there are a lot of theater folk in here, which makes me happy. And I love Danny and Spelman.
I love Danny, and I didn't have the forethought to go to Spelman or any college after high school, and I really am regretful of that.
And I love Ebony. So we're going to have to post, because when the museum turned 20 in 2016, we asked her and Amber from House of June to create a visual that really talks about who we are and what we've done over those years. And it was just a beautiful offering. So I'll share it with you all in the chat as well.
I actually think that's when I formally met Ebony and Amber at that event. Yep, I think so. Kiyomi.
Hey, everybody. My name is Kiyomi Rollins. I'm an entrepreneur, a community stakeholder, kind of related to film and stuff. My husband and I, way back in the day, had one of the biggest Black film festivals here in Atlanta. We told folks that Hollywood was coming to Atlanta a long time ago when we were just babies. Did that for about 10 years. We're serial entrepreneurs. We have a community development called The Connect, which will be a cooperative space where the community actually has equity in it. I'm also the owner of the Good Hair Shop, where my husband and my son have actually participated in one of the LoveMake sessions. Our Christmas tree last year was a LoveMake community session where the community came in and actually created ornaments with Danny. So that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And also I'm a Spelman mom. So all of my monies and my husband's monies is over at Spelman Lane for my daughter, who is there debt-free, right? So entrepreneurship has her there, her second year as a documentary filmmaker at Spelman. And as an entrepreneur, that is just one of the most proudest things, that our daughter, who is first-gen American, is over at Spelman debt-free because Shea Butter paid for it. That's my story.
Thank you.
So Black, those layers of Blackness. I'm sorry. That's just, it's so many layers of Black on top of each other there. Very happy. And
black. So listen, now I'm on mute because my husband is on the phone with his aunt in Jamaica. So it's very loud. So if you all see me doing this, I'm literally saying, shh, shushing it down. So, and then the Jeezy Gucci Mane battle is happening at Magic City. So there's another thing happening right now.
Wow.
There's many levels of ethnicity that is happening right now in the universe. Our melanin is activated to the 15th power right now.
Yeah, that's something that's global. There's something shifting that's happening at Magic City. Like if I'm going to be in a city getting COVID right now, that is where I want to be getting COVID at Magic City.
Oh, wait, it's physically at Magic City?
Oh, yes, sis, they pulled up.
Somehow I missed that.
I missed that too. So
I
I
missed
didn't
that.
even learn. My daughter just hollered, why y'all not in Magic City? Because that's how ethnic my household is, right? And I'm like, what are you? So you actually saw me go, what are you talking about? And she's like, Jeezy, here she is, Jeezy and Gucci Mane's clone is over at Magic City about to do the versus battle. So
Not his
melanin is happening right now.
There's a lot.
They were going to TP Studios. That's what the internet told me yesterday. Black Twitter had TP Studios was going to be all ripped up with the excitement. And so now it's at Magic City. I have so many questions. And I mean, if somebody could just keep us posted, maybe someone keep a phone open.
So they're putting Gucci and Jeezy in the same room.
This is what is happening, Stacey.
Yikes.
This moment. So somebody just keep that open. Or maybe
I will volunteer myself as tribute. I'm going to just do it. Because if I start seeing activity, I will be the news person who breaks in.
Okay. And we thank you for that. We thank you for that.
Thank you. All right. So the way this is set up is that you have a link right here. The art pack, which is this link, this tinycc/spellmake, is going to open in Canva for everyone. And we've already started with some images, some text, some bits and pieces. I tried to replicate the experience of sitting down and cutting up magazines. So we've got some images, we've got some bits of magazines and bits of text. And we've got Canva as itself as a publishing platform. So the way this works, you don't have to use the images that are built in. If you have images on your computer that you want to pop in here, you can feel free to do that as well. And I'm just going to give a little crash course on how to use Canva if you've never used it before. It's a really easy to use desktop publishing platform. Mine looks like my computer, the desktop version. So when I'm referring to sidebars or things that are next to things, they may look a little different on yours if you're using mobile. They may, I think on iPhones specifically, the menu bars show up at the bottom. But basically, you've got a document here that has elements inside. You can click on any of the elements and drag and resize them. And as I told everyone, I'm on a new old computer. So my clicking, and I have to remember how to click and drag on this computer. So you can resize things by pulling at the edges. It works pretty much like anything else you've ever used. You can click on text and change it. Let me see. You have, when you click on things, you'll see, if you right click, you can duplicate things. Anytime you get confused and wonder how to click something new or where to go to find something new, you can click on those three dots. Those three dots will appear somewhere on your screen and give you extra menus. So if you want to change the opacity or the transparency of things, that's what this is. This is the paint roller is a color change tool. You can lock things into place with the little lock. You can click the lock again to unlock them. And you'll notice that when you click on photos, you get another menu that gives you effects. So you can use any of these effects. If you have the pro version, you have a nifty little background remover that takes out the background of photos really quickly. I'll show that momentarily. But you can change the colors of things in really cute, funky ways. It's really easy to experiment with. And if you want to go back for anything, you have an icon that looks like this one that is a little undo icon. What other features? So on images, you have your effects, you have filters that work just like Instagram filters. They're not exactly the same names as Instagram filters, but they do the same things, and you can adjust the intensity just like Instagram. And you can also crop and flip photos as well. Let me exit that out so you can, yeah. So you can flip things horizontally, crop them to be smaller. And me forgetting to click and drag. And so all of the images here, you can manipulate, you can click, drag, and move around as much as you want. We're all using the same, we're all starting out with the same template, but what you do in your template doesn't impact anyone else's. So we've done text, we've done photos. Elements are your decorative elements, and that's the icon that has the little objects, the heart, the triangle, the square, and the circle. All of these elements are like little stickers that you can add. Some of them are animated. You can search, and let's say you want it to look for a gold line. There are thousands of little elements, and it'll come up with a gold line for you. The idea of it being free or pro doesn't really matter if you aren't printing it out, but each one of these pages is automatically sized to be an 8.5 by 11 page. So if you want to print these out, you can. You can make a greeting card. You can make a new profile picture for yourself. You can make these are just digital postcards, but you can also print them out. I know that in my last session, someone made a wall art piece that they were going to print out, and Canva also makes it really easy to print things out when you're finished with them, and I'll show you guys that. And this is just a little collage that I put together using elements and bits and pieces and snippets and stickers and photos. So this is an example of the type of thing you can create. So you've got all of these pictures, and if you want to upload more pictures of your own, you can click on that cloud button with the arrow. That's your upload media, and click that button, or just drag things. And if you're on a desktop, you can drag things into this area and play with that a little bit. So I am going to open up the floor to conversation. If you have any questions about anything, put it in the comments. And anyone on the panel, if y'all have any questions about anything, just talk. We can just talk and chit chat. And if you have any Canva questions, we can answer them as we go along. All right. So I think everyone is everyone good? Is everyone got a little crash course? Good to go.
So I think I have a question. So we're taking the images that we have here, right? And then we're going to like select one of these images and like shift one of these images to like an 8x10 that we're kind of going to add collages, pictures, and things like that to it.
Yes. Oh, and okay. I forgot the biggest part to mention. You want to add another page. You want to add a blank. You can add as many blank pages as you want. So you don't have to work with the pages that are already here. you can just scroll down to the bottom, or if you're on mobile, you would scroll over to the side and just hit the add page button, and it will add a blank page for you if you want just a clean page to start off with. But they're automatically sized to 8.5 by 10, or 8.5 by 11. But it doesn't really matter, especially if you're making, if you just plan to do like an image. I'll show you momentarily after we've made some things how to save them. And you can save them in different file formats as a PDF or as a PNG, or in whatever file format you find pleasurable. So I'm going to start a new page and make a new collage for myself. And as I get started, I want to pose the question to all of you, and anyone can chime in. What is your idea of Black female beauty? When you hear those words, what images, what idea does that conjure for you? What's your definition of that?
I'll jump in. I have this conversation a lot, at the Good Hair Shop. Our space, for 12 years, has been this space where Black women have gathered, and we talked about self-esteem as it relates to kinky, curly, nappy, no hair, bald hair, weave hair, all that stuff, right? And I think it always boils down to just confidence. If you didn't when every time someone walks into the door of the Good Hair Shop, I always say, my husband always says, we greet people saying the word beautiful, right? And over the years, we've watched how literally sometimes sisters will have tears in their eyes as we greet them simply with the word beautiful. Either I'll say, good day, beautiful, or I'll call someone love, right? So I think it's that confidence part. It's that confidence part that once you have that instilled, you walk in it. It doesn't matter the clothes you got on, the type of hair you got on, the HBC you went to, the PWI you went to. It's that confidence, I think, that Black women just exude as we walk, exist, and just, be in this universe, right? Because we came from the universe. So I always think when I talk about beauty, because this is a conversation I spend a lot of time talking about, it's just that confidence part. It always goes to, I'll hear sisters say, oh, I can never wear my hair like that. It's this kinky afro, right? And I'm always confused, like, this is how it's growing out of your head, right? Or I could never wear this. So I think it's that confidence that makes Black women just know when we're feeling good, looking good, just how we can move mountains, just with our confidence.
I agree. I agree with that confidence piece, because I think that our ideas of what's beautiful are sometimes so deeply shaped by external forces. And like you said, just like we've had that conversation at the Good Hair Shop of, oh, I can't wear my hair like that. I can't do that. I actually I was on a message board recently, and a woman made the comment that she was worried about Stacey Abrams coming to the forefront politically, because she resembles Stacey Abrams herself. And she was so worried at what people would say about her appearance as a dark-skinned, larger Black woman with short natural hair, that she felt uneasy because she was so accustomed to being called names and downplayed because of her own appearance. And the response to her was, you need to talk to somebody. You need to stop projecting that on somebody else and stop wishing her failure. But she wasn't wishing her failure. I understood why it saddened me, but I understood why she had those feelings, because so much of a lot of people's ideas of our own beauty are so deeply shaped by the messaging that we hear externally. And it's really difficult for a lot of people to, for a lot of women especially, to break out of that, it takes a lot of work, I think, sometimes to operate outside of that. So yeah, I think that confidence piece is super important to establishing our ideas of beauty and establishing how we feel about ourselves.
And I will also say, I remember seeing pictures of Whoopi Goldberg when she was younger in one of your collage make sessions, right? And Whoopi Goldberg was breathtakingly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember as a child hearing, like, I actually had to look at her pictures, just like from the media, from other adults. You know, Whoopi Goldberg was the butt of a joke that became synonymous with the connotation of something that was ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, it was at one of your LoveMake sessions where you had a couple of pictures of Whoopi Goldberg when she was younger. And Whoopi Goldberg was and is beautiful. And I sat there for a moment with that, just really understanding that, you know, for years, this sister was, you know, synonymous with this. She was the butt of jokes. You know, and Black folks, we did that, right? It wasn't coming from anywhere else but from us. So that confidence part, and even just trying to break through what you said. Hold on one second. Tosh, quiet, please. Trying to break through just this whole European way of what beauty is. And I think about that and literally from one of your LoveMake sessions, going through those pictures and actually seeing, I think you had about 3 or 4 pictures of Whoopi Goldberg when she was younger. And I would have killed for them cheekbones. I would have killed for that skin. And she was just breathtakingly beautiful. But we fed into, when I say we, just, you know, the culture that be fed into this whole thing of Whoopi Goldberg becomes the, you know, equates to not being beautiful or being ugly.
I think I was going to add that whereas we talk about social media being troublesome in a lot of areas, I know for me as an adult coming onto social media in, I guess, 2007, I joined the Facebook or whatever it was called at that moment. But I had just, you know, done my first big chop and, you know, was going natural. And I think finding community and seeing women across the country have hair that I, you know, grew up in New York City. You saw a lot of natural hair. I saw a lot of people with locks and different things, but that was in like the 80s and 90s. So being at that age in 2007, seeing people that way. And then once Instagram came on the scene, and I think I love images as a museum person. Instagram to me is so powerful because we have so many images. So seeing Black women from all over just be beautiful in all these different ways, right? So from the way our skin shines when the sun hits it, to how we looking yellow, to looking at the things we do with our hair, to just seeing so many images. It was such a great way to solidify what I always knew is that we were beautiful. But then I surround myself with pages of women who have the confidence that they just look bomb. However, they look bomb, whatever skin tone, whatever hair they have on that week. Whatever they rocking, they look dope. And so I think that's been one of the super positive parts of social media for me, that it always confirmed that I can be beautiful in lots of different ways, lots of different iterations of myself. Because I think we just, like, that's just how our DNA rock, from our bone structure to our lips, like all of it to me is really beautiful. Our bodies are beautiful and imitated and emulated. So I think for me, Danny, I see Black beauty as being so many things, right? All the skin tones we have right here in the session are examples. Like we just fly, like Beyonce said in Homecoming. Like we just so fly. There's just so much that we can do and are and look like that. I feel that dopeness within my molecules.
Angie's conversation makes me think about an exhibition that we presented gosh, I think it was maybe 2015, and it was called Posing Beauty. And it was looking at over 4 decades of Blacks in photography, and it was curated by Deborah Willis. And it was such a moving experience because we're looking at images of Lola Flash, Lola Flash's work, where we're having conversations around even gender identity in terms of this conversation around beauty and some of those constructs that we're looking at when we're identifying what one must look like to then think of as attractive, or how we're even looking at a gendered body. Then we're looking at moments from debutante balls and what are they called? Not coronations, cotillions, and then they're having conversations around like, what does it happen? What happens when you're looking at jet beauty of the weeks? And that was a work by Hank Willis Thomas, where he took several images that were from jet magazines, and it was the beauty of the weeks, and he created a wallpaper of sorts. And there's an image that I kind of use when we're having the beauty conversation is looking at a student looking at that wall. And it turned into being such a focal point in the exhibition when we started talking about in whose eyes are you looking at yourself and whose eyes are you viewing, beauty. And it becomes very complicated for me personally as someone who works in an image-based industry. And I'm using that in so many different layers of definition. So it now becomes something that is extremely abstract to me, that even goes on the complete opposite end of the consciousness spectrum. When someone has the strength to cry openly, I find that beautiful. When someone is able to show up in a way that challenges a traditional idea of what someone is supposed to present as, I find that beautiful. When there are moments where we're uplifting children and our elders and really thinking about hospitality and kindness as revolutionary acts, that to me shows up as beauty. So I've really been taking what I've seen with my eyes out of the equation these days and really looking at what happens in the body or what happens in the environment as being my marker for beauty at this point in my life.
I will just share. It's so funny. Like I remember this was already on my calendar, and I'd forgotten, and then I remembered. And so I say that because I have a practice every morning where I get up and I journal, I meditate, I do some type of inner work, whatever that looks like for me at the moment. In this particular moment, I happen to be working a fourth step, and I'm 11 years into recovery. I'm working a fourth step. So the fourth step is an inventory step, and it's terrifying, right? So it's not so much terrifying in that it is only as beneficial as you allow it to be, and as deep as you're willing to dig. And so today, I kind of unintentionally set off some landmines. Today and yesterday, one, I realized that there was this disconnect, right? That it was very easy for me to see myself as beautiful, valid, talented, all of these things here, like intellectually here. I could see all the, like, it's like a no-brainer for me. Like my confidence around my work and all of that is just like, boom, there. And then it feels like my body is a completely different entity. Like my physical self is a completely different entity. Like Like they're not even in the same place. I feel like they're two different, and it's very hard for me for multiple reasons to see the beauty and value my body. I know intellectually that I should value it. I don't, just because of history of trauma, history of just being confused about like having my perception of what is beautiful in my body be based on what someone else told me or said, primarily men. And to the point where it's so ingrained that it feels like I can't get from under it. And I think that there is a beauty in I felt it was just it was so profound for me this morning when I just kind of pulled the string on the sweater and figured out where it went. I don't value my body because value is found like and it was just such simple, truthful statements. And then I sat with this, okay, so what do I do with this information, right? I know these things. I can't make myself love my body. I've been 44 years in this body. I have every reason to love it, right? It's gotten me through this time. It survived active addiction. It's this body has put in work for me. I worked in hospitals for 21 years, but all of that I can't value, right? So I think there is, yes, we affirm each other. We affirm each other in the visual. We affirm each other's beauty and intelligence, but also let's kind of dig deep. Let's dig deeper than what we see on the surface. And that's why I think this exercise is a very interesting way in kind of doing that, because I think I can affirm myself all day and I can just hear it and see it and saturate myself in it, but I'm a rock. And it takes a while for that to sink in, and it takes a different kind of work. And that work is beautiful. And that work is worth committing to understand and unpack and really just relentlessly work toward a really radical love of self is really the most important thing any Black woman or femme can do, is that kind of work. Because it's like, I watched a documentary some years ago called All of Us, and you had this doctor who, a young Black woman, I think she was Eritrean or it doesn't matter, she's a Black woman, and she was going into all of these communities, dealing with Black women who at that particular time had like the highest rates of HIV. And in the middle of all this work she was doing, in the middle of the documentary, she slept with someone she had unprotected sex with someone. And it boils down to this: we can be a million different things out in the world. We can conquer the world. But there is something that happens when that bedroom door closes. There is something that happens when we are in close proximity to the thing that we feel validates us, that breaks us down and breaks down that shell often, even in the most powerful Black women. And it is such the more I do this work on myself, the more I want to be a part of being able to have Black women do that kind of excavating, because it is important. It is important, and it is important that we show up for each other as we do this work, and support each other as we do this kind of work.
Thank you for that. I'm trying to take a minute and reflect on that, because I think that the idea of our inner work, and that constantly it being a constant process, that no one can do for us, and we can support each other in it, but we can't do it for each other, and no one can do that for you. It makes me, in kind of thinking about Black Image Corporation and thinking about some of the themes of even the decision to focus on Black women for this particular band for these images, and pulling on themes of the Black Madonna and pulling on themes of Black women as God, Black women, and that God that is in all of us. I think that finding our own, that idea of finding our own center and really digging into what that means, that's kind of where we're shifting, or where we need to shift. And I think that there's a lot of language about that now, but there hasn't necessarily, if we look at our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, that same language, that same articulation didn't really exist for a lot of people, but it was still happening. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. How historically have we operated? Have Black women operated in that centering, in that grounding space, in that constant creation and affirmation and recreation of ourselves? Ebony, I feel like you had you're on mute.
Danny, can you say it again?
Well, I wanted to talk about that idea, going back to what Stacey said, of kind of finding that grounding and that centering of ourselves as Black women, of ourselves, finding that piece that goes beyond the surface of really affirming and establishing who we are at a real core level. We have this language around that, and we talk about that with each other. We have kind of a framework for that, and our mothers, our grandmothers, as we hear their experiences, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, our aunts didn't necessarily have the same language around that need, around that that drive to center who we are. But yet it was happening. And I always kind of operate on this look backwards to look forward idea, and pull on what were my ancestors doing, even the ones that are still alive. I grew up with my mother, both my grandmothers. My great grandmother just passed away at the age of 98 3 years ago, so she was in my life for most of my adult life. And so what can we pull kind of historically in that regard from the women who came before us and how they kind of grounded themselves in the world? What can we pull from that?
Yeah, when I asked you to say it again, because when you were saying it, I was thinking about my mother and how sometimes I find myself thinking like I was the first formal artist in my family. And then I think about, and sorry if you hear some beeping, it's fry trap orders. But I was thinking about how my mother, she's a florist, and she's always engaged with like flowers. And she can do like the most beautiful things with the most simplest of flowers that you find in a garden or just like at your local supermarket or whatever. But she would take a Saturday and I would be with her, and she would go around to all these different vendors and she would curate these flowers. And she would be so mindful about it and so intentional about it. And then she would go home, you know, like in the garage or at the kitchen table, and then just start sculpting. And she would be there for hours, right? And she would already have cooked and made sure I was fine. But I would just be like looking at her in awe of how she really took time for herself, and how she really like anchored in doing things that made her feel who she was before me. And so I always had an artist near me. And so that's something I've had to remind myself, because, you know, like a lot of times, you know, and I'm not one who says this, but I hear people saying how like, we're not our ancestors. And it's like, you know, we can talk about that all day, but it's like, when I look at the people around me, you know, and my dads, my aunties and all them, like they've been doing like real trill shit for a long time. And it hasn't always had like a name to it. You know, hasn't always had like this formal thing to it, but God, they were doing such beautiful things. And I just look at my mom and I'm in awe now of how she did all of these things, and she made time for herself when, as you said before, that wasn't necessarily a time where it was hashtag self-care, right? Or it was like, you know, people applauding a mom for doing what she wanted to do. So I just look at that, and it made me think of it when you're talking about it, how beautiful that is to have a very close memory of seeing such an everyday Black woman, of course my mother, but just seeing my mom do incredible things, because we didn't have necessarily a lot, you know what I'm saying, and seeing her do incredible things with what she had. And I think that's like definitely informed my practice, and how I approach my work. You know how we create films, making something out of nothing. So yeah, it's a really beautiful reflection to have there.
And I don't think we necessarily think of those little bits of, not even little bits. We don't necessarily think of those moments of creativity, those moments of self-care, those practices as what they were. And a lot of times, even with generationally, like you were saying, you as a creative, you as a filmmaker, and being the first artist in your family, but your mother was an artist, you know what I mean? But we didn't conceptualize that for what it was. I pick at my grandmother often, because my grandmother, as amazing a cook as she is, she won't write down any of her recipes. She's like very resistant to it. And she's always told me, if I want to write them down, then I just need to stand and watch her write them down, or I need to learn it well enough that I can write them down. I'm like, Grandma, I can't write down the weight of the handful of flour in your hand. Like, I need you to put it in a cup before you do it so I can. And she's like, no, you gotta work that out. You gotta figure that out. But I pick at her often because there are these cookbooks that the church that I grew up in, her church, made as a fundraiser. And the recipes from my grandma in those cookbooks are not foods that my grandma has actually ever cooked, to my knowledge. It's stuff like cranberry rolls. Like, it's stuff that I've never seen her cook. And I remember the first time I noticed it, I asked her, and I'm like, the things you cook at church to this day, the things they rely on you on, those aren't your recipes. Like, why? What is going on? And she's like, oh, I just took those out of a book. She was like, I'm not writing down my recipes for people. I took them out of a book and I put them in the book because they told me I needed a recipe. And that is her contribution to the recipe what's the word, to the recipe, to the cookbook committee that she's been on for the past 50 years. But seeing her operate on these committees at church and being on the cookbook committee, she's on the calendar committee, and she's always done the design of her class reunion, her class reunion program. And when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, when I was in middle school, she started getting me to draw the pictures and do the design for the class reunion cookbook. And she would have me help with little things. And it occurred to me this year, when they thought they were going to have a class reunion again, my grandmother is an art director. Like, she's been doing these art direction things for years. And she was my first client as a designer. She would give me a brief and tell me what they needed, and I would draw it and design it, and she would work with me on the layout and say, no, this should go here and this should go there. And she trained me in that. If you ask my grandmother, is she an artist? Is she creative? Does she do? She would say no, but she absolutely is. The way she calls me at 7 o'clock in the morning because a recipe appeared to her in a dream and she's about to try it out and she wants me to know, that's that creativity and that magic that we don't always identify with with the women in our lives, and then the women who came between, because it was just, things just became work, or things just became absorbed into the day-to-day of who they were. But I think that we do really have to come to a place of honoring those bits and pieces, and honoring those practices, and like really holding them for what they are, and honoring them for what they are.
Connected to that point real quick, Danny, about I guess we start calling them ancestors at this point, our grandparents and folks like that who are potentially still with us. I was reading the article in Bazaar with Ya Gassi and Toyin, and there's this beautiful moment where they talk about their parents not understanding, both of them, their art. One is an author, and one, I don't know why I'm telling that to this group. Never mind. Y'all know who they are. So they were like, my parents don't understand. We want to be full-time artists. And what is that language about? And there's this beautiful quote where they're explaining, the parent begins to explain what the child does and the fact that they get it as art. And she said, oh, you're creating space for people to dream, to think, engage, and to tell stories. And I just thought that was such a beautiful moment where we get to have that intergenerational conversation, for them to see themselves in a way as artists, and what some of Danny was talking about, but also to understand some of what we do as creatives. Sometimes I guess we might make it sound weird as well. Like, we make it sound really vague and whatever, but like putting it in that way and connecting it back to culture was really beautiful. And it's a beautiful article by itself, but I thought that just connected a bit to what Danny shared about her grandma. It's a common conversation we have in creative spaces, connecting our families to what we're doing and to the art that they were doing at that age and what it looked like, and just, putting the language in, as Danny said.
And I think sometimes they don't get it because we don't know how. Sometimes we don't get it. Sometimes we don't know all the words to explain that. Well, yeah, I even often have to explain to my mom that, yeah, I went to school for graphic design, but I'm not really doing graphic design, but I kind of am, but it's graphic design in a different way. And I think if we had those conversations more often, it would help us kind of pull the strings of connecting what we do to what they've done, or to what's familiar. But yeah, I think that sometimes that confusion is like, we're also kind of in this in-between space of kind of discovering as we go along what this practice that we're doing actually is. And that's another thing that makes it so cool to see images of people doing what you're doing. That's one of the reasons I hoard imagery the way I do, to have this record of kind of everything we're doing has been done before in some way. We're kind of operating in cycles. One of the projects that I is an ongoing project that I'm working on, is called Bronze Thrills, and it's a celebration of Black women's sexuality and sensuality over the years. And it started from actually the main magazine that was the competitor to Johnson Publications. The company was Good Publishing, and they published Bronze Thrills and Jive magazines that were romance confessional magazines. So they were a little bit racy. There aren't as many of them out there because proper women didn't get subscriptions of them to their houses. Usually you would go to the beauty shop and someone would have them if you ever have seen Lackawanna Blues, there's a scene where Macy Gray is getting her hair done and she's actually reading a Bronze Thrills magazine as she's getting her hair done. That's where you went to read these racy magazines. And one of the things about that project is that I'm pulling on all of the conversations that we have today. Like we talk about, I mean, when Cardi B came, or not even Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, that we're having these debates and these conversations about how is she talking about having a hot girl summer, but she's a college student, and confusion that those can exist within the same person. But when you look at these magazines and when you look at what's been happening before us, there were profiles of shape dancers and showgirls on the pages of these magazines right next to the debutante cotillion announcements. Like they were coexisting in the same space. Women who were burlesque dancers were national celebrities. They were famous. They had whole careers. But now it's like we kind of slip backwards and we're having these conversations and working through these things, but we've already worked through these things. Or our forebears have already worked through these things, but we don't realize that there's a touchstone to that already. But that's why kind of the imagery, the ideas, the conversations that come from the imagery, that's where my interest is, because I just feel like somewhere in what has already been done are the answers to these questions that we're constantly having now. And if we could just marry them together, we could jump forward. it's I don't know.
It's like no, and I also think from like Bronze Thrills, what I kind of have a question about, or when I look at just the love of Black women's bodies during the time of the Bronze Thrills era, burlesque, dancers. When I look at those pictures, I love that there's so many different body types, right? And so I was looking at old school video doing the butt, right? EU 1990s doing the butt. And I was looking at everyone from my generation as we were probably gyrating as that video came on. I know I had biker shorts on during that era, getting into my own, perceived sexuality at that time in terms of what I thought sexy was. And it struck me at that point that there was a point that Black women, we had either you were big, you were small, you had a big booty, no titties, you had big titties, no ass. And it was just how we existed. The video vixen was not, boobed out, the Black version of what the Kardashians have sold back to young Black girls. So I always have this thing with the babies that are coming up now, that where do we miss this acceptance or confidence, of our bodies? That from the bronze thrill, burlesque era, 70s, I'm pretty sure my parents, my mama probably got, some pictures of her, grown folks pictures that she took, for the loves of her life, right? But when I look at body types, like I've never thought to physically alter or change, my body. And when I look at the younger babies, that come into the shop or out in the community, and I'm already seeing the things that they're doing to their body that they feel like they have to do, right? In terms of being accepted as beauty, that's the thing that I'm always confused about, because as Black women, we just existed and we love. Yes, we have those challenges, but just never to the point that we're almost being this caricature of what society is selling back to us about what Black women's sexuality is supposed to be. So that's something that I think about a lot, that we just existed and all our different body types, but now there's this thing that we have to look a certain way. I was fine with my little being part of the itty bitty titty committee because, I had some hips. I didn't feel like I had to have, boobs or whatever, right? So I just think that's just something that when I look at, the young sisters coming into the shop, and we freely have conversations now about altering our bodies, that I just wasn't, I just think that was something that Black women, we just be kind of a part of. So I'm always curious as to how do we go from the love of bronze thrills of just beautiful, curvy sisters in all shapes and sizes to now feeling like we have to alter our bodies as Black women for the sake of beauty.
Well, I think that
the ass stuff confuses. The ass stuff is what confuses me, because it's sort of like, it's not even, the shape is odd. The shape is unnatural. Now, for me, I've always been heavy. I've always had a big old ass, like a big old ass. Like a big, okay. It was big. It is big. And I got drugged all through elementary school, high school, and then the video vixens hit, and they were so small. They were so, I could never be them. So that is actually when I gave up BET. I mean, Bob Johnson would have done it for me anyway down the line. But 97 is when I gave up on BET, because I couldn't identify it at the time, but that tide was already starting to change. And it was there was more media crafting around what was acceptable for Black women to look like. There always has been that, but like you were saying, there's always been this kind of intra-community kind of situation. But even within that intra-community, to be clear, it's fucked up, because I was sexualized by Black men very early. But you're right. There's something about this shape it reminds me of when they talked about how if Barbie were anatomically a woman, it would be impossible for her to walk. And I watched, because I downloaded the TikToks. I downloaded the TikToks that the kids have, and I just scroll, and I don't post nothing because I ain't doing them dances, but I scroll, and I ran across these, Angie, okay, we'll do a TikTok dance. But I ran across this one, these couple of women, and they were on their way back from the girl having her ass done. And it was a whole situation where, oh, she can't sit down, and she's leaned over the car without a seatbelt on. Sis is driving 1,000 miles an hour, and City Girls is playing in the background. And I'm like, this probably won't end well. So yeah, there is something very, it's not even human though. Like it's no one human has a waist this small and an ass that big. And I was thinking,
for that, like I didn't even know that sisters was really walking around with booties leaking. It wasn't until sisters came into the shop and they would sit down and they would get up. I was thinking, oh my God, you had an accident. I need to get a pad, a tampon. What do you need? And it was like, oh, no. We're just, trying to make sure, we weren't leaking. I still didn't get it. And I was just like, did he do some Kegel exercises? What's happening? Because I just couldn't. But I watch women is when they sit down or how they don't even sit down. Like you don't even get a chance to sit down in your full Black womanness as you're trying to very gingerly. So I don't, it hurts because I think what you said in the intro part, it was to see Black culture that we've made it so that Black women are risking their lives to be a caricature of what I call it the Kardashian syndrome of what the Kardashians are selling back to us about what Black women are supposed to look like, right?
It's like they've taken everything great about Black women and heightened it to an extreme that is just bizarre.
Yeah.
And like, how do you walk that back? Like I look at some of these, even the facial work being done is alarming.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my question is how do we, because it is like a funhouse mirror kind of effect. It's like we've gone from a space where our beauty was not appreciated in a mainstream kind of media way. But then it shifted to the point that pieces of us are appreciated in very specific, but it's very specific pieces. It's like these lips and these cheekbones and these hips. It's like but I think that goes to how Black women have traditionally, all in this structure that we're in, have always been pieced out in that way, have always been consumed in that way. And I guess that is the big question, is how do we reclaim that? And how do we reclaim our idea of ourselves rather than what's kind of being flipped around and regurgitated back to us piecemeal? Because now it's to have these lips and to have these hips and to have this face shape, but it has to be this skin tone. It has to be this hair. It's still not, it's not any particular one person in their fullness. So what does that mean as we move forward and as we kind of going back, grounding ourselves and centering ourselves in who we actually are, if what we're seeing isn't really anyone and isn't really us? How do we get back? And then what are we really trying to get back to?
I don't know. I think it just made me think of something that Stacey was saying. Because I think images, like we all consume images, right? I love, I think it was Stacey when she said the TikTok. I still call Facebook the Facebook, right? I had no idea that, sisters were, after you first give birth, you're trying to have your, snap back 2 days or in the gym. I witnessed sisters in the gym being pregnant so they could working out, like aggressively working out, Black women, so that they could have their snapback picture 2 days afterwards, right? And I look at it and I'm talking to sisters because I'm always fascinated by the Black woman human experience. But as I go through, I don't even know what the snapback thing was. I don't even know if we could even get back to it, because it's like, as Black women, we drive culture. And at a certain point, we've just said that it's okay that while you are 6, 7, 8 months pregnant, that you were in the gym because you want to make sure that your first picture that you take on Instagram, face ready, done, and your body is snapped back. Not, are you healing? Are you connecting with your baby? Are you, connecting with your partner, at that time? And I think sometimes when I have conversations, it just seems like the concepts are just so foreign when we just talk about beauty, comfort level, how you can walk outside, how you can exist. I go back to that statement that we talked about earlier, I could never do. And I just think it's kind of sad because as Black women, it's just exhausting to be a Black woman, period. But then to now have to exist as a caricature of what a Black woman is. And you kind of made me think about Sarah Bart. There were pieces of her body that, people took, put on the postcards. And it's like we're living this very Sarah Bart, experience of what Black women should be and how they should look like and
Mm-hmm.
I find it to be extremely complicated or nuanced because there are so many spaces and examples throughout the years, long before what we're talking about now, where Black women have had conversations around plastic surgery. Well beyond the past 10 years. It's been a conversation that has come up over 50 years ago, since the beginning, the media, imagery, our whole concept of what we are identifying as the standard will always lend a space for people that operate on the fringes and that complicated relationship in and out, left and right of center, and even inside of that. There are these moments where I think back on, especially around the 90s, when we're looking at advertising, and in this moment where someone said, you know what, the Black dollar is really powerful at this point. Now we really want to invest time, energy, jobs on people, in people to promote and speak to this demographic. And I think that there was this space when an industry that is tied to commerce wasn't directly speaking to you. You had some gray areas and some spaces to navigate. But now, where we're increasingly identified as a market to advertise to, I think that opens up the space and complicates the conversation on even thinking about our origin stories, even thinking about our relationship, because we know this. Think about being in the West End. So Spelman College, located in the West End, this moment of watching the neighborhood change, even right down to, as we notice in places all over the world, but specifically in Atlanta, changing the names of streets, okay? And there are moments where, as someone who was born and raised in Georgia, seeing a street name, I sometimes have to remind myself, Metropolitan Avenue used to be called Stewart Avenue. And I am from here. So, it can be like within a matter of years or months, your whole brain can get rewired as creatures of habit, and being, the way that our brains are connected, and the power of how art and imagery can really change you, literally change your values, change how you actually are seeing things. So that alchemy that's in visual culture can have us looking at ourselves in the mirror and seeing something completely different. Even with the strides that have been taken with technology, you can look at something and think it's actually real when it's not. And I just find that, you know, very much intertwined in our eyes, you know, in the way that we receive information, and it's now turning into the ways that we're telling ourselves and others how we see ourselves and members of our community. That's why griot culture is so important, you know, and continuing to tell the story. And we know that even with storytelling, the next person who retells it is going to tell it differently. Even when I'm thinking about how did we start, I think in our private chat, there was a conversation on as we were all going around in our introductions and talking about how do we come here? How did we arrive at this moment? It was that comment about coming full circle. When we're looking at some of our greatest and most impactful pieces of literature, a lot of that storytelling is happening either in the beginning, the middle, or the end. You know, I'm not the beginning, but you're finding out the story in the middle or knowing what happens at the end in order to understand what the beginnings are. So I just really think orientation is a moving target, as well as definitions. Our language is ever evolving. The way that we're seeing ourselves is ever evolving. And past is becoming quite malleable these days.
No, that's very true. Where we are and what we see and what we're experiencing is very much a moving target. And I think that's why I don't know, then what do our touch points become then? As we try to navigate the present, what touch points do we even have to where the end of that story should be, or where our next step in that story should be?
I think that's where your work comes in, Danny. I think about your work with Bronze Thrills and continuing to make sure we see those images of what normal sexiness looks like. I think what Lovecraft did with the Miss Ellis and having her shimmy with fake Josephine Baker with her roles and everything there for us to seeing an adult, mature body. I think continuing to push back against the video. There ain't no videos even no more. So I guess they just vixens. They Instagram vixens. I don't know what we're calling them.
Instagram models.
But see, I guess I feel like there's a place for the vixen. There's always been a place for the vixen.
But the balance, I think the balance is what we're missing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think pushing back and making sure there's balance. Like I am all up on the page of Megan Thee Stallion or whoever, but then I'm also making sure that I balance that out for myself by going to see other, quote unquote, normal bodies, right? Or the bodies I might see every day and enjoying those as well. So I'm like actively checking myself and balancing out my media and making sure I follow pages like the work that you do so I can be reminded of what we have looked like and the fact that of what we look like right now, you know?
And I think there's room for, there's room for all of it, really, even to the extremes. There just is. I feel like it's beneficial for us to create that room and continually engage in discussions that encourage us to explore why we make the choices we make, and that encourages that digging deep that I was talking about earlier to figure out, you know, whose gaze is that body for, right? It's just, who is it for? Like, I look at, as much as like I love Cardi, I look at her sometimes and the way a swimsuit fits her. And it's always just a little left of right. Just anatomically where things are supposed to land. But I still But I still love her.
And I think that balance is kind of what's, yeah, I would agree that it's a balance thing. But I also think that, I mean, I remember being young, being in elementary school and middle school, and probably way too young to be as into Lil' Kim as I was. Like, I probably shouldn't have been in the 6th grade asking for a red fur coat so that I could be Kim in the Crush on You video. But I was. There I was.
That was a win.
And I had
that was
the
a
coat.
W.
My mom got me the coat for Christmas. And I had that coat for years. And the older I got, the less I wore it. And she eventually gave it away. And now I'm mad about it because I wish I had that coat. But anyway, I remember growing up and I don't know how I achieved that balance. Like, I've asked my mom, what was it that they did with me that I could be there, lyric for lyric, the whole album, with these things that I really didn't understand what in the world she was talking about, but I knew she was it. But then also understanding how that worked in my own personal real life as a 12-year-old, and kind of processing that in a way that turned out to be healthy. Like, I know that definitely informed who I am today, but it's not, there was always a balance there. And I guess, I don't know, when we just having the conversations about, like, we always get into these conversations about role models for young girls, and then what happens, and what are younger women emulating. And I guess I think I have a skewed perspective because I've always come from a balanced place in it, that I know isn't necessarily everyone's viewport. But I think it's possible because I know that it's possible with me, or I know that it happened with me. I think that, I don't know, I think that we have, but I do definitely think that there's space for everything, because there's a space for everyone, because again, we've always been having these conversations. We've always been having conversations about plastic surgery and what the perfect shape is, and what I do think that what has shifted over the years is the who is it for, and kind of shifting at least our public conversation of, what do you want to look like? What do you want to dress like? What do you want to do? And shifting it out of to please a man, because a partner was always a man, in the public discourse, and shifting it to, what does this mean for you? And what does this say to you about the way you look, the way you are, crafting yourself? Who is it for? And is it for you? And is it for your own edification, and not necessarily for the satisfaction of someone else? I do think that that's a definite.
And Danny, I want to jump in on what you just said there, because I was sharing with my daughter that, a Facebook memory popped up, and there was a flyer that I appeared on back in the day of Atlanta's heyday partying, and what I look like in my Atlanta party days, definitely different from what I look like now as a mama with 3 kids, right? And I was having this conversation about, I was dressing for myself. And I was really dressing because I wanted another Black woman to acknowledge that I was fly. I wasn't dressing for no dude. I just needed another sister to look at me and be like, you got it, sis. That's all I needed, right? And I was having a conversation that when I would get up, do things that made me feel great, made me feel, at the time younger, trying to come into your own sexuality and freeness and things. It was really about what I was feeling for myself. And I know every Black woman doesn't have that. And I think that might be that source. It might be if you're given the space and the freedom to really, truly love yourself, it doesn't make you, quote unquote, hate on someone. I've never had a problem with any, sister that was a sex worker, dancer, the exotic type. None of that phases me really, because I have such a profound love for myself. I also think about access to images. I don't know if I would still be the same way growing up now and being fed the images that I think our generation is being fed now. Back in my time, you didn't really have cable. It was a luxury. So my images were still very limited in terms of who I had access to, what I could see, what I could interact with. So my whole surrounding being in existence really was believing what my grandfather said. I was the most beautiful Black girl that he'd ever seen. That was law, real, everything to me, because I didn't have any other context, right? But growing up this time and these days with all of these images, I'd probably still be challenged. But I think that's something that you pointed out. It is feeling beautiful, sexual for yourself, not to try and get accolades, from your partner, from your spouse, or to get that attention. And I think that's the part that hurts me with a lot of the young sisters, that, they're doing it for the attention and not because you just really love yourself. And to go back to that balance, like baby girls are just on 10 at all times. I'm like, at the grocery store, you to go to Home Depot, like it just, so I don't know, it's just different. But I wish that for sisters, they could just have that balance of loving every part of their existence and not feeling like they have to do something for that attention.
Mm. And being able to, I think, being able to relish the attention when you do want the attention, and being able to enjoy that, because it's almost like when you are constantly craving the attention, the external attention, you don't really it's all the time. So then it becomes pressure, and it's like it sucks the enjoyment out of it. Because sometimes you really do relish that attention, and that is a wonderful thing. It's just you can't always be craving it, or you can't always be chasing it, I guess is the thing, because then it's just kind of empty. There's no, or at least for me, there's no enjoyment in it. But sometimes I want attention. I think we all do, and I think that's beautiful. But yeah, and I think that we're getting close to our wrap up time. So I just want to kind of think about like everything we've kind of discussed, and then how do we how do we move forward? How do we continue to, I mean, Kiyomi, you talked, I think that was a good segue of talking that Lyric, your daughter found a picture of you, and you were able to have a conversation about that. So what is the importance of maintaining an archive of ourselves? What is the importance of building an archive of what we know of ourselves and what we know of our past, and then using that and sharing that forward into the future?
I think it's just being very intentional about what young people have access to, and supporting things like what we're doing now, supporting what Stacey's doing, Ebony's doing, all these creatives that are here. I think one thing you just touched on too, Nanny, the access that you have, that you're allowing right now in this digital space. We know that, every Black and brown baby may not get to a museum, or maybe they have that access. So I love that this is an an option of making it available. But I think it's just being so intentional. I go out of my way when something's on television, or I might see an advertisement or an ad or something, and I'll point out to my son how beautiful this beautiful Black woman is, right? And I'm very anal about it, very, very anal about it. And I'm thinking that I do that in the space of wanting him, or I feel like I have to do it because I'm combating all of the images that are out there that are being forced. And to kind of go back to that word balance part, to be able to show that here are these beautiful women that are just walking around, just, you know, regular and free, to have some context about things. Jingle Jangle, I know you guys watched that on Netflix, brought tears to my eyes because you could see, you know, this beautiful, the lady who played the post office delivery sister, who was in love with Mr. Jangle, right? And that sister was like, I'm getting this man, right? And I just enjoyed her character, right? I enjoyed her character. I enjoyed the shape of her body. I enjoyed, you know, her skin type. I enjoyed it. And I love the fact, and I hope that it was intentional on the director's part to be able to cast her in it. But I think if we have spaces, we need to be able to, one, amplify work that is already out there, that does exist. And then when we have the opportunity to create, to make sure there's balance in whatever that, you know, creation is. You know, I'm a parent. I'm tired of the racially ambiguous Black babies. So I love the fact that on Jingle Jangle, it was a girl that looked like that you had to use a pick to comb through, right? I can appreciate that. So I think we just have to be very intentional about the images that we're putting out there, supporting the works of folks that are doing the great work, like the sisters that are right here, sharing things. So once we come across a great work, don't hold on to it. Make sure that we're liking that content, sharing that content, leaving a word about that content, and supporting it. So I think that's one of the ways, just to make sure that when things do exist, that we are not only the gatekeepers and archiving for ourselves, but sharing it and just have that access for everyone in the community.
Shalea, did you want to chime in on kind of how we can, the importance of kind of writing ourselves, I guess, kind of that idea of writing ourselves into history, maintaining that idea of ourselves as touch points toward the future, for younger women than us, and for people beyond us. Oh wait, you're on mute. Let me take it off. Is it working? Or Stacey, did you want to chime in?
I can. Yeah, I think a large part of my work is literally this, is to, I write to the healing of Black people, to the celebration. It's in my bio, every bio I have, to the celebration of Black people, to our own navel gazing and examination of ourselves, for our gaze, right? I don't write things so white people can figure out how to deal with us. I might have done that at some point. That day is past, and it's been past for many, many years now. And so I like to write about fat Black women. I love to write about fat Black women having whole lives, having whole sexual existences out here, from the BBWs to the super BBWs and everything in between. I love writing about Black trauma in funny ways, because that's how we handle it. Like, if we weren't like completely dragging and reading each other constantly in our families, we would just shoot each other. We would be white people. We would just roll up and shoot each other. We would be the Menendez brothers. See, if the Menendez brothers would just drag their father across the table a couple times.
Just have the conversation.
You know, just, I mean, but in all honesty, like but that dynamic is what I want to look at, right? And I just stay writing about us in as many different ways, and imagining us in different realities and things like that. That was one of the main things I loved about Lovecraft Country, is it did dream us into different realities. I love the fact that that there's beginning to be such an abundance of Black storytelling that we don't have to be afraid to be critical of Black stories, because I think critique is important, and I expect y'all to talk about my shit when it comes across. I expect y'all to have conversations. I expect you to challenge me as a writer. I am not like, this ain't just ain't for you. No, like I find it problematic that a piece of work requires a syllabus to understand it. That's me. But it's just sort of like, I have a problem with that, honestly, because that is a certain kind of white supremacy that lives in us, that to say, oh, ho, ho, you don't get it because XYZ and you don't see these things. And those things can exist within the work, but also I just want like my grandmama or your grandmama or anybody's grandmama to sit down there and get the story and be entertained. So
yeah, you don't have to have a whole reference.
Right. You don't have to have like, well, baby, what is, no, that story hits and it can still be complex.
And if there's an opportunity to educate with those pieces,
yes,
then it's actually an opportunity to educate, not a barrier to engage.
It's like, yeah, it's like, well, if you don't have this, but like, because the thing that was confusing to me is like sundown towns, it's the whole fucking country. As someone who has driven back and forth across America a couple fucking times on my own, and Danny, you can attest to the fact that I will put pins on Facebook to tell y'all where I am. The whole fucking country is a sundown town. Like, stop trying to isolate places. Nah, nigga, the whole thing, the whole shebang-a-bang. But like, again, I can say that about Lovecraft Country and also say that I absolutely love what it's doing. And that's what I love that we're driving at, is this world where we can talk about our work the same way we've talked about the so-called canon for all these years. Like our canon becomes something that stands in and of itself, and you can get with it or you can get the step in, period. I had to put in a Martin reference. But yeah, I think that it's important for this, for Ebony, for all the storytellers, and even like when you're owning a business, and particularly the kind of business you own, Kiyomi, that's storytelling. You're walking in, you're constantly people are, I'm sure, are constantly asking you, when did you do this? How did you start? That's a narrative, right? And that narrative's going to keep going beyond your company. And
Stacey, you have to make a visit one day. Our space, literally, stories just reveal themselves from Black folks. Mm-hmm. Danny has sat there many a time. We don't know what happens when people walk through those doors, but they literally feel it's a safe space, and the stories just come out. Some things I would never share in public, right? And they just share, which just goes to just Black folks. We're just an amazing group of folks, right? Yeah. Danny, you remember when the baby came there and thought that Beyonce's Before I Let Go? What did he think that song was, Danny? And we all realized we were old. He thought Before I Let Go was by I can't do it.
I do know that part of the conversation was that
the group that sings, we ain't getting younger, you might as well do this. What's that group called?
Oh my God.
Yes. That's what it was.
Remember?
He thought that was a Jagged
We sit there minding our Black-owned business. Yeah. And this baby,
wow.
Baby, remember?
Wow.
And the whole shop stopped and looked at this Black man like, and I think Danny was the one to break it to him, because we didn't have nothing else to say. What did you say, Danny?
He was starting a jazz festival. He was starting a jazz festival. That was the story. That was the intro to the story.
No, was this a Facebook post, Danny? Because
it was. But those are the
It happened
things.
in real life.
Those are the things that we had. And I think
I remember the post on it. Wow.
That story has worn my nerves thin.
Yeah, like
I remember somebody debated me on the most popular Frankie Beverly song and said it was Happy Feelings. I was like, you are out of your fucking mind.
No, a whole lot. That's a whole lot.
No.
Baby, before I let go.
Listen.
White people know before I let go.
A cut of cuts. A cut of cuts.
Before Beyonce, they knew they were just getting in the line and start.
A cut.
So, hey, ladies, I just want to jump in. Jeezy and Gucci Mane, the clone, have just walked on stage.
Okay.
So they're in true Atlanta. They are actually officially later than Lauryn Hill to arrive because it is 8:51 and folks been on here since 8 o'clock. Stacey Abrams is on here. So I just want to let y'all know.
Stacey trying to get
Jeezy is in full length fur.
Hold up.
Can somebody show their phone on the screen?
Oh my God!
You know what, guys? This is perfect. This is perfect.
But Gucci snatched though. Gucci already snatched.
We are at the end of our LoveMake period, so we can transition.
Or not.
The most Atlanta transition ever. An Atlanta institution, and we're about to go to another institution of Atlanta.
We can transition into this further Atlanta
institution. To do this on this television screen,
and it's exciting.
I wish I was there with people.
I want to thank all of you for joining me in this conversation this afternoon or this evening. It's not afternoon. And please show off what I've been just making stuff over here, but please show off what you made so far.
Stacey, I was over there being analog. Come on, analog. Danny, can I ask a question? Yes. I did want to get into your art technique. So would you, on one of your Instagram platforms, do a little mini video while you're still prepped about your process? Because I think collage looks always so easy, but what many of us know is that you are working with a lot of tones, putting textures together in interesting ways, making it accessible for people. So I would love for you to get your fine artist on and just share a little bit about your process and maybe what the vibe is that you're feeling. Because we're not here for it right now, but I will be here for it on tomorrow when the full-length fur is not on stage. And I want to talk. So if you would mind just sharing some of what's happening in Stacey's video. Oh my God.
I will. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Angie. I will do that. But yeah, all of you.
Hey! Can you go big, Danny, so we can get a picture of this foolishness happening? Can you take I just
give me 5 seconds.
Okay.
I just want to thank y'all for showing up and for having this conversation with me. Please be sure to share in the comments and on Instagram and all those things, the things that you made while we were talking and whatever came to you. And this is, again, the first of many digital craft experiences. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, y'all.
I wouldn't have done this. This is on my altar.
That's the point. That's the point.
Why we ain't